Electric vehicles. You see them everywhere now, right? On our streets, in our driveways. They've totally gone mainstream. But have you ever really stopped to think about how they get to us? I mean, how do millions of these things safely make their way across a massive ocean? Because as we're about to find out, shipping them is a huge challenge, one that can have some pretty fiery consequences.
Yet, it's not as simple as just driving them onto a big ferry. The giant lithium-ion batteries that power every single one of these cars, well, they bring a very unique and very serious fire risk to the cargo ships that carry them. The old ways of fighting fires at sea, they're often just not going to cut it anymore. And at the heart of this whole problem is a really nasty phenomenon called thermal runaway. Now, this is not your average fire. It's a violent, self-fueling chemical reaction deep inside a battery cell that can spread like a disease. It spews out flammable gases like hydrogen and is just incredibly difficult to put out with traditional methods. The stakes here are as high as they get. So how in the world is the maritime industry supposed to handle this brand new kind of fire? Well, it's coming down to a completely new rulebook. A whole new playbook for safety, designed by classification societies like Bureau Veritas. It's called EVFP, and it stands for Enhanced Fire Protection for Ships Carrying Electrical Vehicles. Think of it like a special certification, a badge of honor that a vehicle carrier, one of those giant PCTC ships, can earn to prove it's gone above and beyond on EV fire safety. Now, this EVFP thing isn't a one-size-fits-all deal. There's EVFP-1, which is kind of the baseline, the essential stuff that you can even add to older ships. But what we're really going to dig into is EVFP-2. This is the deep dive. Bureau Veritas calls it an extensive set of mitigation measures. But what it really is a complete, top-to-bottom safety strategy. And it is way more demanding. All right, so what does this super comprehensive safety plan actually look like on a ship? Well, it all starts with the foundation, the actual physical space where the EVs are going to be stored. Under EVFP-2, you can't just think of it as a parking deck anymore. No way. It's basically treated like a fortress. It has to be a dedicated area, clearly marked on all the fire plans and at every entrance. And this is critical. It can't be anywhere near tanks holding fuel or other flammable liquids. It is all about separation to stop a small problem from turning into an absolute disaster. And that classification as a hazardous area, that is a huge deal. The rules officially call this space Zone 2. Now, what that means in plain English is that the ship has to be designed with the assumption that an explosive atmosphere could form, even if it's not likely. And that one simple assumption, it changes absolutely everything about the kind of equipment you're allowed to put inside that space. So what does that Zone 2 label actually mean for the gear inside? Well, it means every single piece of electrical equipment has to meet two super strict ratings. First, it needs an explosion rating of at least IHC. That's the highest level, meaning the gear is safe even if there are highly flammable gases around, like the hydrogen that can leak from a damaged battery. Second, a temperature class of T2. This just guarantees the equipment's surface never gets hotter than 300 degrees Celsius, so it can't become an ignition source itself. You're basically treating the area less like a car garage and more like a high-risk chemical plant. Okay, so we've locked down the space itself. It's a fortress. But how do you actually keep an eye on what's happening inside? Let's talk about the ship's eyes and ears, the detection and alarm systems. You can see right here the massive jump from that baseline EVFP-1 over to the EVFP-2 standard. But what I really want you to focus on are those bottom two rows. EVFP-2 adds something that isn't required at all in the baseline, fixed and portable gas detection. And that is a total game changer, because you're no longer just looking for smoke. You're sniffing out the invisible danger before a fire even has a chance to start. Now let's break down that first upgrade. The systems have to be remotely and individually identifiable. In the middle of an emergency, this is absolutely massive. Instead of a general alarm that just says, fire on deck 5, the control station tells the crew, alarm, smoke detector 37, grid location B2, or flames spotted by camera 12. You get an instant exact location. And that just slashes your response time when every single second is critical. And about that gas detection, how sensitive are we talking? It's pretty incredible. The system has to scream an alarm when hydrogen levels hit just 20% of the lowest possible concentration needed to ignite. It's an unbelievably early warning, giving the crew precious time to act before things get really dangerous. So, the alarm goes off. What happens next? EVFP-2 lays out a whole arsenal of specialized firefighting gear. This includes a dedicated decontamination area with showers just to protect the crew. It demands a fixed sprinkler or water mist system right there in the EV area. Plus, it adds some really powerful portable tools for containment. And everything is run from one central command post. And when I say powerful tools, I am not kidding. These are not your garden variety fire hoses. The portable water curtain nozzles that are required each have to be able to pump out a minimum of 60 cubic meters of water an hour. That is enough to create this immense wall of water to isolate a fire and stop it dead in its tracks. And finally, for containment, the ship has to have 2 huge fire blankets. And the size requirement is just wild. Each blanket has to be big enough to cover a 9-vehicle area. That's a 3x3 grid of cars. That just tells you the scale of the incident they're preparing for. The goal isn't just to smother one car, it's to contain a whole affected zone. So, you've got the fortress, you've got the high-tech response gear, but how does a ship owner actually prove they've put it all together the right way? Let's get into the paperwork, the testing, and finding the right people for the job. See, it's not enough to just buy all this fancy equipment and bolt it to the deck. EVFP-2 demands hardcore proof. That means submitting super detailed fire control plans, drainage calculations, operational manuals. All of it has to be approved. And then, once it's all installed, everything gets put to the test. Mandatory onboard functional testing for everything, from the video software and gas alarms to the actual flow rate of those water curtains. You have to prove it all works together as a system on that specific ship. And this is where picking the right partners, the right suppliers, becomes so important. To build a system like this, you need specialists. For the detection side, the Sentinels, you might have a company like King On Industry. They have Bureau Veritas recognized gas detectors that are perfect for sensing the hydrogen and carbon monoxide that EVFP-2 requires. Then for the response, you need a company like Shanghai SureSafe, which specializes in the fire extinguishing systems, the water spray, the nozzles, all the gear that actively fights the fire. And that really brings us to the key takeaway here. Achieving this incredibly high standard isn't a one-stop shop. A ship owner has to basically be a project manager, carefully picking and choosing and combining the best solutions from multiple experts to cover all the bases: detection, suppression, containment, the whole shebang. So when you put it all together, it becomes really clear just how incredibly thorough this EVFP-2 standard is. It's a truly massive step forward for safety out on the open ocean. At the end of the day, what rules like EVFP-2 really represent is a deep, necessary commitment to safety. It's all about making sure that the amazing innovation we're seeing in the car industry doesn't create new, unmanaged risks for the global supply chain that brings those cars to us. It's about ensuring safety keeps pace with progress. And that kind of leaves us with one final big question to chew on. We all know EV technology isn't standing still, right? Batteries are getting more powerful, their chemistries are changing all the time. So the question is, how are these incredibly detailed safety rules going to have to adapt and change again to keep up? It's a huge challenge and one that's going to require everyone, regulators, ship designers, and suppliers, to stay on their toes.